And here we are going to talk about the human rights in Canada. As we all know, with the Confederation in 1867, the Constitution was created, but it was until 1982 that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom was incorporated at the constitutional level. So pretty much it talks about our rights as individuals in this country. So it would protect us against any federal authority if they exceed their power or the way they are acting. And examples of the protected grounds in the Canadian Charter of Rights are our freedom of expression, our right to vote, our right to mobility, and our right of association, right? So that means that I have the right, if I am a citizen or a permanent resident in Canada, to live in any of the provinces of the country, or if I want to begin a business with any partners, I have the right of association or the right to create a political party, right? So these are the grounds that are protected at this level. Now, in the next slide, we can see the more specific and let's say how these rights would operate. Because at the federal level, we have the Canadian Human Rights Act. So this act prohibits discrimination in federally regulated workplaces and services. So that's what I was talking about when we were looking at the chart, right? If I am taking a service from a bank or from an airline or from Canada Post, and I believe that my human rights have been violated, it would be subject to federal jurisdiction. That means federally regulated employers and service providers. Now, in the next slide, we go to the case of our province. Here and if we can, please go to the next slide. We are going to talk about the 16 protected grounds in the New Brunswick Human Rights Act. That means that these are our rights, no matter our legal status in Canada. And that means that it involves any private institution or provincial institution. We all have the right to be treated with equity and respect. So the New Brunswick Human Rights Act protects these 16 grounds. And I will just read them very quickly. Age, gender, race, national origin, creed of religion, color, ancestry, place of origin, physical disability, mental disability, marital status, family status, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, and social condition. So that means that if someone is denied a service, let's say, for example, to have access to rent a house, based on any of these grounds, the service is denied, I can file a complaint to the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission, which, as I mentioned, is a provincial administrative tribunal. In addition to the 16 grounds, the Act also includes protection for sexual harassment and reprisal. And this is important because we, unfortunately, in these days, we still see that the data, and you can have access to the annual report of the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission. Women are still more subject to discrimination than men. also at the federal level, because that's what federal statistics show. And just to give you additional information, in this last report from 2023, 2024, the New Brunswick Human Rights Complaint received 197 complaints. And 90 of them include multiple grounds. And that's something we will talk about also, which is the intersectionality. And as newcomers and as immigrants and as new oldcomers and as citizens of this Canada, we have to know and understand our rights. Before we go any further, we'll just take 2 minutes, and we will not be able to cover all of them, but I want you to pick one ground and look into your phone. It is okay to use ChatGPT, Google, the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission to find what this ground means. So all of us will take one ground. So I will say the ground. Please say your name if you want to pick that one, just to make sure we don't repeat it. H. A name, please. I'm sorry, who's taking H?
I will, Abby. Thank you, Abby.
Abby. Thank you, Abby. Ali, sorry. H. Gender?
Dana.
Dana, thank you. Race?
Maria.
Thank you, Maria. National origin?
Eu vou take it. Luis.
Thank you, Luis. Creed or religion?
I will take it. Mohammed.
Thank you, Mohammed. Color?
Suhail.
Who?
Suhail.
Ahmed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Ancestry?
I'll take it.
Name, sorry.
Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. Sorry, I'm asking names because the screen is so small that I cannot see who's speaking. That is why. Thank you. Place of origin?
Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Physical disability? Okay, there's no left, right? Everyone has one ground? Anyone missing?
I'm leaving in
It-
just
it-
a couple minutes, so I'm not going to participate.
Don't worry, that's okay. I hope you still have a chance to hear part of the conversation. I understand that. Okay, so let's take 2 minutes. You can use Google, ChatGPT. Try to find information on what that ground means, and we will discuss. Go ahead, please.
While I do that, I was going to interject that we have had, and this you may encounter too as volunteers, 2 people we helped with a human rights case in New Brunswick. Different circumstances. We won gold. We were able to get a pro bono lawyer who was familiar with each situation and was successful. So, you know, these things that is, don't hesitate as a volunteer to reach out to community to get help you need from your support. Okay.
Okay, let's take 1 more minute. All right, let's get started. We'll go through this rounds by giving examples on cases. And the reason why I asked you to do that search is for your personal consumption. Just to know that if you feel, if you sense that something is not right, that something is happening, we always have the tools around to clarify. And that is important because sometimes, and of course, I am not here wearing my hat. And sorry, I didn't mention it, but I work at UMB as a human rights and equity officer. And I am not wearing that hat today because this is a volunteer work, but I always like to mention that because I come to find on everyday situations that people are facing discriminatory treatment and they don't believe sometimes it is happening. They believe it is okay to tolerate certain attitudes that are abusive. That is why. So don't worry, you won't have to speak. I just wanted you to dive a bit more into these grounds. So age, no one can be discriminated based on age, right? When someone is hiring a candidate for unemployment and they decide to go with just from the beginning with a younger range of candidates instead of considering everyone because of their experience. Gender, right? Gender, sex, and sexual orientation are grounds that are usually linked and they intertwined. The sex refers to how the person is seen according to the way they were born. It's a female or a male, right? And that also includes pregnancy, because we have also seen, and when I say we have also seen, I am talking about the New Brunswick annual, the New Brunswick Commission's annual report, because they have an explanation of the cases, which is very interesting. So that's what I am talking about when I say we have seen these cases of pregnant women being discriminated, most likely in the workplace. Gender is, of course, how the person is presented to the world, right? So I may be born as a man, but I use the pronouns they or she. So that's how I identify myself as a gender. And the sexual orientation comes to the, yes, as its name indicates it, to the sexual desire of a person, right? So all of these together cannot be a matter of discrimination against anyone. Now, when we talk about the next round of race, it also comes very much connected to color, right? Race and color are usually connected. And this comes to the stereotypes and the assumptions that usually people make based on your appearance, right? And it also comes, and that's also why it is important to know and to understand what microaggressions are. Once I was talking, and this is from a personal experience, I was talking to a colleague at work, and we were discussing on our preference whether we would like in-person or virtual sessions. As I disclosed from the very beginning of this conversation, I am from Mexico. So as all of you may know, English is not the first language in a Latin American country. It's not my native language, right? So we were discussing about, yes, and I prefer virtual, I prefer in person. And this colleague makes this comment and they say, well, in your case, because you're an immigrant, it makes sense that you prefer in-person sessions because you have to be able to understand directly and listen what people are saying. These are the type of microaggressions that come to race and color, right? Is the assumption that because you don't speak this language as your mother tongue, I assume based on your race and color that you are not proficient in the language. That's an example. And that's why we also have to raise concern about how discrimination works, because sometimes it can be very subtle, right? National origin also comes very connected to the place of origin, right? Again, it also connected to stereotypes. When we say, and let me share with you another example, and it comes also in a conversation, and I was talking to someone, and this person, it's always a question when people ask you, and where are you from originally? Which I also find that discriminatory, but people tend to ask these questions very often. And I always tell them, I'll let you guess, and then I will give you a response. So, of course, it's interesting what I find when people are guessing. Some people have assumed I am from Iran. Some people have assumed I am from Korea. Some people have assumed that I am from an indigenous background. But what it was interesting when I disclosed that I was from Mexico, this person told me, "Oh, but your English is really good." So that's another example of discrimination, microaggressions, and stereotypes. So what that means is that for someone who looks like you speak very well, because my assumption is that someone who has this appearance wouldn't be able to speak English proficiently. So these are all the type of situations and circumstances, and that's why I also invite you, if you have an opportunity, to read the report from the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission, because it gives you a lot of light on how these things work. Now, let me talk about one more, which is ancestry and connected also to place of origin. Ancestry usually comes to an indigenous background because that connects with this spiritual way of understanding and viewing the world. And as you see, I am combining the grounds, and I am doing this on purpose because we also have to understand the concept of intersectionality. And that's also what we see now in many of the complaints that are being filed. That it's not only based on one ground, but multiple grounds. So when multiple grounds combine, we are facing this intersectionality of grounds that no one should be discriminated against. Intersectionality, it's not only a social concept, just for everyone to know, it is also a legal concept developed by an American Black attorney, Kimberly Crenshaw, in 1989 when she had to sue an automotive company because she was not hired for an opportunity and she was not giving the job. And as I mentioned, and I will cut it there because of the time, but we have then this 16 grounds in addition to sexual harassment. That's also, it's protected under the New Brunswick Human Rights Act. Now, if we can please move to the next slide, and we are going to talk here.
Tanya, sorry, I just want to make one comment about the sexual.
Yes.
Piece. Just
yes.
One reason it was identified in this program, it came from sessions we had with the St. John Newcomer Center. And this was something that came up quite frequently in their work, was identifying the increased rise and incidences of this, but also to the lack of understanding of what it is. So people not being aware that that is a form of sexual harassment. So again, I just want to affirm that as a volunteer, just to to be aware of that. In fact, they put in a grant and received money from the federal government to dive more deeply into sexual harassment reporting, especially in the workplace, from support group for immigrants and newcomers. So I just wanted to add that piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy. And that's important. And I hope we can clarify a bit more on that aspect in with these examples. These are cases that are real and that have happened in New Brunswick. This is a very famous case, but because I am not authorized to provide names, I will just talk about the facts. And the reason why I'm doing that is because they are now publicly available and you can find them on the internet. So this is a case from a Black male employee working as a sales manager in a very big and corporate world, in a company that is international. He has been in the same company for over 20 years. And by accident, because one person from human resources accidentally sends to his email the payroll, he comes to find out that he is paid less than his coworkers. And it turns out that all the rest of the coworkers are white males. He complains, and the manager says that his behavior is aggressive and that he is insubordinate to the policies of the company. And as a consequence, he follows a termination of his employment. So what do you think from the grounds, from the 16 grounds that we saw in the previous slide would be the case under discussion here? What grounds do you think?
Race and color.
Thank you very much. Race and color, right? So he took his case to the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission. It was a big fight for him, but the company had to pay a considerable amount of money after it was demonstrated that it was a case of discrimination.